right, what's up everyone? So today I am back to essentially expand on why I believe that I'm a 9 in the Enneagram system. So if you've been keeping up with me either on Twitter or on here or both, you'd see that I posted my Enneagram intro video, and then shortly after that, I also posted a video where I was explaining the part 1 of this series, actually, where I was explaining how I landed on the type that I believe that I am now. And it showed, my process from going from thinking that I was a 2, a social 2, to thinking that I could actually be a 3. And then now I'm like for certain sure that I'm a 9. And that was kind of like toward the end of last video where I left you off. So I kind of like gave you guys like that cliffhanger and everything. But after that audio profiling session, then I was able to go back and I was able to look through a whole bunch of things, read a lot, have many conversations with people who know me. And wow, 9 resonates, especially the social 9. From my understanding, a social 9 is pretty much the 9 that wants to merge with groups. Unlike the other 2 variants of 9, which is the one-to-one / sexual 9 or the self-preservation 9, the social 9 wants to merge with groups, and the social 9 pretty much practices sloth, which is the 9's avarice or whatever, by sleeping on its own needs. So the social 9 kind of has this message that, oh, I don't really have any needs, or I'm going to suppress them so much because I want to fit in so badly. So instead, I'm going to make everybody else's needs my needs. And thinking about this, this not only sounds incredibly like me, but on top of that, it relates right back to what I said in my video, the authenticity of FE. Now thinking back and knowing about the Enneagram, I'm like, is that FE plus the social 9? Or is that really also just FE? Or does that have like very little to do with FE, But I think that I'm inclined to believe that me being a social 9 plus an ENFJ FE dominant, then it just kind of, if anything, amplifies that. So in that video, I talked about how Jamila, one problem that she has with me, and she says that she's always had with me, is that I don't compromise. Compromise is a word here meaning to sacrifice one's internal needs, but not totally, but more to meet the other person halfway. So both parties are meeting in the middle, if you will, to be able to get both parties' needs met, a kind of win-win situation. Jamila says that I don't sacrifice, I don't compromise, I just completely sacrifice. I kind of just go along with whatever she wants. And most people, when they do that, then they feel like, a little part of themselves is like always going missing because, they're not hearing a voice. But if you are a social 9, then this is kind of like, it's different because you actually feel like you don't have a preference. And to this day, I still feel this way. And that could be annoying to many people. Growing up, going all the way back, I always just wanted to fit in. And I know a lot of people probably like to say that. I don't want to sound like the stereotype, but it's true. I did several things just to fit in. Embarrassing things, Maybe I'll share some stories and we'll see where that goes. I grew up in an African household. And I not only grew up with my African parents, but I also grew up with African relatives who lived near me. I didn't live in an actual village. I grew up actually in New York. But it was kind of like a village because all of my relatives were like near, And then I also grew up with my uncles and my grandparents and my aunt and my cousins, all of us in the same little apartment. And so it was almost like having several siblings. Those of you who are African, that majority of Africans, like the vast majority of them, have this traditional mindset, because most of them seem to be SJ. They have this traditional mindset of children must be seen but not heard. And children doesn't mean, oh, up until you're like the age of maybe 7 to 10. Children means up until the age of, oh, you're either getting married, you're paying rent, or you're off to college. Although I talked a lot as a child, I always received the message that my opinions, thoughts, all of that, they didn't really matter. And I'm not trying to bash my folks, my relatives, any of that in this video. I'm just kind of like explaining my backstory. But the message that I received oftentimes was, oh, don't talk back. They called me lawyer/professor. And they often said things such as like, oh, nana yao, debia, which pretty much, they're pretty much like complaining like, oh, Denzel, like every time that I say one, then you have to say two. And I didn't really see it as like me being disrespectful, but more of just me trying to like clarify things. There was one situation where my ISFJ grandmother, who just loves to just keep the peace, like worse than me, especially because she's an FE auxiliary. So it's like, anyway, me and I believe my grandfather, or one of the other headstrong, stubborn people in my relative family, we were in a like heated discussion. I was being very respectful, but the person I was talking to, which was either my grandfather or my uncle, he was being very rude because I'm a child, even though I was probably like 18, 19 at the time. But I'm a child still to them. And I was just correcting something, like I was just clarifying something. Like I was like, oh no, uncle, this is actually, what happened, or yada, yada, yada. And my grandma just came and she's like, don't you know that if an adult says something, then that means it's right? And I'm like, well, no, grandma, I'm still being respectful. Like, I'm just trying to like let him know that this is what really happened, and etc. I just remember this, like she started like complaining. Like she started saying like, you should just know that an adult is pretty much always right. That was the message. And I was like, so she was like, yeah, she said that if an adult says something, then you just accept it. You don't have to say anything. She's like, that's how it is in our culture. And I was like, so you're saying that even if the adult is wrong, I should still say something? I mean, I should still keep quiet. I should let them just be wrong because since they're an adult, then they're right. And she's like, yes, that's how it is in our culture. You have to respect adults, stuff like that. And I was like, well, I don't like your culture, and that was like one of the first times I ever like spoke up about this. And literally the face of dismay that she had was like, oh, like where did I go wrong with you? So growing up in such a household and everything, and having such relatives who were often saying plenty of things such as like, oh, you talk a lot, and like just kind of like making me feel unimportant. Or not making me feel unimportant, but like suppressing down my opinions, or the importance of my opinions and thoughts. Growing up like that made me kind of adapt this mindset that my thoughts and opinions don't really matter as much. If I could go deeper into this kind of upbringing by giving more examples, then it would just totally explain so much about me. However, if we're being honest, I don't want to make it seem like I'm bashing my family members, because that's just not right, and you don't know where this video will end up at. But what I will say is that, just to further push the point of a social nine, social nines, that's a thing for them. Like we believe that by suppressing our own needs and our desires, our wants, subconsciously we do this. We've just learned to like neglect our needs. We sloth ourselves. The way that we practice sloth is by sleeping on what we desire. And by doing that and just merging and adopting what the group desires, then we pretty much kind of like merge with the group, because what we want is we want to feel connectedness. And that's why, if you guys keep up with my videos, I'm always talking about, I'm a social 1-to-1, social sexual 9. So secondary, I just want to merge with somebody else. And I think that also explains my whole idea of of the cult that I talked about in one of my videos. And I don't think I went into as depth with it. But I also, I kind of like spoke about this with my interview with Emily Barnes. And it's just like that idea of connectedness and everybody sharing the same values. And just kind of like nothing sinister in this cult. It's just more of like a deep clique, a deeply embedded clique where people are super, super loyal to each other, and we all are sacrificing our own needs for each other. Because I believe that if everybody's scratching the other person's back, nobody's back is really itchy. But too many people are worried about scratching their own back that they have a hard time being able to, scratch other people's. And, it's kind of like we all have to look out for ourselves. We all have this mentality like we have to look out, we're guarded for ourselves. So as I've adopted this mindset, then it's actually been kind of like a challenge and a struggle to even make videos like this. What actually happened was I watched Elliot Hulse's videos on YouTube. And for those of you who know Elliot Hulse, he's another ENFJ. And when I'd watch his videos, I believe that he's either an 8 or a 3. He's powerful in how he speaks. Like I sit down and I'm talking with you guys and I'm trying to find like a middle ground, but he's like an achiever. He's a motivational speaker. Like he will set up his camera and he will like stand up in the camera like this. And he's like, you have to do this, go against the system. Like he's really like just in your face like that. You guys go check out his videos. You'll really see. And the NI is really heavy there. And his FE definitely comes out in a very aggressive and masculine way. And for being honest, I first started trying to model this. I admired that. And I admired that kind of like assertiveness that he had. Because I was like, wow. This is an ENFJ who's really good at just like voicing his thoughts and opinions. But I couldn't do that as well. And so what actually came of that was my first spontaneous speaking video was a video called Confidence versus Conceit. And in that video, I was like, I can't really like be as aggressive as Elliot because it's just not me. And that's when I kind of like just rested into, this is my natural style, sitting in front of the chair, like sitting in front of the camera, being chill and just saying my thoughts. And that's exactly what I did in that Confidence versus Conceit video. One thing that I did take from Elliot Hulse is the whole done thing. So if you go watch his videos and you check out, at the end of his videos, he always says done. And that's where I got that from, because like that, I just thought that was pretty cool. I even forgot that I adopted that from him. But yeah, he's someone who really voices his opinions, even if it's going contrary to what society is thinking. And that's how he became like a thought leader. And I really admired that. And then it makes sense now because me being an ENFJ as well, and then me being a 9, I want to have influence. And if you are blending in too much with what the group thinks, then you're not going to really switch things around. But constantly, I just kept on thinking like, oh well, I don't really have influence as much as I think that I do. The best thing that I can do is adopt what the group believes, and then if anything, just further deepen that. So when I'm sharing my thoughts and everything, I don't try to necessarily contradict what people are already thinking. I instead just kind of like take what they're thinking, like I hear all of their perspectives, and then I try to like find a middle ground with everyone. And so I'm not really presenting anything as novel, at least not that's not what I was thinking that I was doing, but I was just more helping to merge perspectives of different groups. Even to this day when I share them, I'm always like, for anyone interested, for anyone interested. And I had to encourage myself a lot throughout videos, like such as visionary thinking. That video, I was thinking about like I was trying to encourage myself, like, hey, you know, I'm not really that big of a deal right now. I don't think that I will be. Same thing with what was the name of that video? Process people versus product people. In that video, I was also pretty much saying the same thing, and I was trying to encourage myself, and this was all me trying to integrate into 3. The 9's growth pattern. The 9 in the Enneagram is connected to the 3 and the 6. And so this explains why a lot of times I could be seen as a 3. Apparently, being seen as a 3 as a 9 is a very good thing. I didn't know this until that profiling session. I didn't know that 9 and 3 were even connected in that way. And then on top of that, I listened to so many different podcasts recently on people who are Enneagram 9s, and many of them were saying that, yeah, you know, now people think that I'm a 3. Now people think that I'm a 3. And these are very healthy, developed Enneagram 9s, because they not necessarily have they actually become a 3, but the 3 is our security position. So we're really good at being able to go there. It's like a tertiary function, as one of my subscribers pointed out for me. So it's like, okay, you're really good at being able to go there, and you're really like, it's almost like natural for you, and it's like, you know, I got this in a way. And then it's kind of like you're able to rest in it, and you're able to present yourself in that way. So me also being an ENFJ on top of that, and then studying communications and everything, I realized that, oh, you know, I am good at being able to vocalize my opinions and everything. It's just that I have to actually form these opinions first. I have to take time with myself to be able to know, what do I think aside from what the group thinks, even if it may be contrary to what, you know, the group thinks, and it might cause controversy, which is a whole other issue. So in my ENFJ interaction video with Megan, she asked me, like, how do I feel about controversy? And I gave my opinions on there. And by then I had no idea that I was a 9. I was still thinking that I was a 2 at this point. And so my whole thought was just like, oh, you know, it's just simple NI. Like, you have to know, as an ENFJ, at least according to Personality Hacker, you just know how you're influencing society. You know how you're influencing other people. And then ENFJs who spend time with their NI, they understand not only the social dominoes that comes with the FE, but they also understand the thought dominoes. You know, like how the types of ripples that are going to send out, that you're going to send out, and how they're going to play out for the long term. And that was something that I always had like a talent in, but I started to develop skill in that. And I thought that, oh, simply if you want to speak on controversial topics, then you have to think a lot about how these topics are going to land. You have to know what you're talking about. You also have to know that in expressing these things, are you in the right position? You have to bring in some devil's advocate, which comes from talking to other people and discussing things with them, trying to understand, okay, hey, how would people disagree with this? And then seeing, is this the right thing? I once again thought that this was all just, you know, being ENFJ. But then looking into the 9, it's like, oh, this is actually a 9 thing. I often talk about the show on here called Middle Ground, which is a YouTube show from Jubilee. And I really love that show. And I think that I said previously that it's the most NFJ thing probably on YouTube. But I also think it's even more the most 9 thing on YouTube. These two groups of opposing sides, they sit down and then they oftentimes calmly discuss where they think, like, you know, so you'll have the atheists versus the Christians. And instead of, like, you know, having all these ad hominems or people getting heated and, you know, like just like really like passionate and aggressive, at least the way that I perceive it, they're like, oh, well, in my opinion, I see it like this. And it's like, huh. Well, in my opinion, I kind of see it like this. It's like, huh, I wouldn't have considered it that way. Shake hands at the end. That's the type of discussion that I like. I heard one time that, betas, which is the NFJs and STPs, they love heated discussion and stuff like that. Like, they love, getting seemingly angry and, stuff like that. I was like, well, I don't really resonate with that, because for me, as soon as I start seeing that the person is, raising up their voice and it seems kind of angry, it takes me back to my childhood when this happened so many times with relatives and even friends at school who whenever they assert themselves in such a way, then I'm like, oh shoot, I just offended this person. This is conflict. Oh my gosh. Let me just back up. And I just go right back to, kind of not necessarily being soft, but people could see it as conflict avoidant. Now, in my opinion, I don't really see myself as conflict avoidant. I see myself as unnecessary collateral damage avoidant. I literally think through various things, how things are gonna play out, how to word something. I think through all of these different things before I say my opinion. Is this opinion even worth mentioning? If I do mention it, how is it going to influence the crowd? All of these different things just go through my mind naturally before I say them. And that's why it could seem like, I could be long-winded and I'm just explaining a lot of different sides. That's why I also want to hear everybody's side, because I'm trying to always be mindful of how to mediate, how to find a middle ground. That's my biggest strive in life. I want to find a middle ground for everything. Even when it comes to Christianity, I want Christians to be able to see things through the unbeliever's perspective, and I'm trying to also help, since I'm part of the Christian group, I'm trying to also help the non-believers to see things through a Christian perspective. And it's kind of I often feel like I'm the bridge between these two groups, because a lot of Christians, if we're being honest, they're unable to see things through that side. They have so much of a us versus them mentality, and then non-believers, they have a lot of wrong views on Christians too. Not all of them are wrong, unfortunately, but they have a lot of wrong views on Christians too, and I'm just trying to present a different perspective to them. And so me being an ENFJ, once again, plus being a 9 and a social 9 at that, really helps a lot once I've finally used a lot of my personal development in MBTI, developing my introverted intuition function. Then I've been able to also develop myself as a 9 to now to the point where I've integrated 3. And even though I'm still oftentimes conflict averse and everything, I'm still an EJ. I still try my best to bring peace, and being an FE dominant at that, I'm better at it than most 9s might be, because being an FE dominant, I'm not only seeing all of these interconnected, things, all these white lines between people, and then the red line representing conflict between these people. I'm not only seeing that quickly, but then being a 9 and FE dominant, and then having NI as an auxiliary function, I just have a more of a drive to go and fix that issue. But I'm still very careful with how I'm fixing that issue. And so it's almost like, if we're being honest, I'm realizing that being an ENFJ social 9 may be very uncommon, and that helps pepper a lot of my leadership style. So I've said a lot already so far. That's kind of the back history, but I just wanted to also go through a few things that I've noted down ever since I've discovered that I was a 9. And one of the things is needing time to process or let the cookies bake. For this, I always use the analogy that for me, I'm slow to voice my thoughts and opinions on things oftentimes, because I need to allow my cookies to bake. Just kind of what I just told you guys, I think through things very deeply, how they're gonna land, how to create the least collateral damage possible, if I'm in the right, so many different things before I finally come out and start speaking my opinion, because I want to make sure that it's as peaceful as possible, it's as effective as possible, and honestly, it keeps away a lot of like conflict or whatever. And I want to make sure that I'm right with a lot of things that I'm saying. The analogy that I use with the cookies is that if you take cookie dough, for example, and I know that a lot of people eat cookie dough oftentimes, but a lot of cookie dough is bad for you. If you take a lot of cookie dough and you eat it, then there's a high likelihood that you will become sick, vomit, all of that. And that could cause a whole bunch of problems. And you would have then thought back like, man, if I had just allowed the cookies to bake a little bit longer and just had been patient, then this would have prevented so much collateral damage. So with me, that's kind of how I think. Like I have to hear all perspectives on an issue first before I'm able to really like voice what I think about things. And if I hear an opposing perspective, I actually do take time to consider it and think deeply about it before just judging it as wrong. Like, so I really like to gain perspectives and insights and ways that people look at things, and then I ruminate on it. So I've gotten called out a few times on Twitter because people would often get upset with me, like, why do you always have to go back and think about stuff? Why can't you just say what you think right now? And it's like, and that, I guess that's a little bit of the indecisiveness that apparently comes with nines. Thankfully, being an EJ, I'm not as indecisive, especially because if I'm making a decision for the group, then it's easier to merge with the group. But when it comes to like being decisive, as in like for me, then that's a little bit more difficult. Like, and so I have to take like more time with myself to be able to think and like look at all of the perspectives that are there on the table. In one of the podcasts that I was listening to of someone being a 9, then they mentioned something called multi-directional empathy. And this was pretty much assuming that everyone has their own internal logic for everything. Now, once again, this could be attributed to maybe TI as a function, but being a 9, I think that once again peppers that a lot. It naturally allows the person to want to always understand where another person is coming from, to understand their logic, because if this makes sense to you, help me see how and why this makes sense to you. And then I will be able to understand and help the other. If you want to really create harmony and peace, in my opinion, you have to always understand the other sides of the issue. You have to understand both sides. And this is stuff that I talk about all the time on my channel. Like the importance of being understood, the importance of understanding other people before being understood. And I talked about even things such as like, please leave mediating to the mediators. You know, you have to kind of really involve yourself with both parties and really hear both sides out. And then see how it made sense to them, and then explain to the other person, to each party, like, okay, so-and-so thought this and this and this, and that's why this happened, and this is what they're thinking, this is how they perceive the issue. So-and-so thought this, and that. You really have, it's all about creating that middle ground. And so when you are able to grasp that idea of, oh, you know, everybody has their own internal logic, then you kind of, it's easier for you to create harmony and peace in that way. So another thing that I found explained in discovering that I was a 9 was that I'm not good at anger. I have no skill there. That's actually why I stay away from there. So one person that I always think about or thought about before discovering that I was a 9 was Gohan from Dragon Ball Z. To briefly summarize, Gohan in Dragon Ball Z, the early Dragon Ball Z series, was a 9, and I didn't know that he was a 9 back then. I just saw him as like, you know, typical INFJ, if anything. But he was the typical peacemaker type of guy. Like, and he did not like anger. He tried to avoid anger at all costs. Finally, it was his anger that helped save the world in Dragon Ball Z, because he was finally pushed enough to the edge to where his anger exploded, and he pretty much almost lost control, and he destroyed Cell and Cell Juniors very quickly. That was actually how he was also able to tap into Super Saiyan 2. But the reason why nines don't like anger is because we not only feel that it brings conflict, because it's like, well, if I can become angry about this issue, then that means that it could put me in conflict, direct conflict with another person. So let me try and find a way to like suppress this anger and all of that. I relate to Gohan in that sense because I pride myself on almost never getting angry. A lot of people always talk to me about that. They're always, oh, you know, they can't see me hating somebody. They can't, even in my videos, you'll see me in videos passive aggressively showing and expressing anger. But it, just like you heard, hopefully in my last YouTube video, I ruminate on a lot of things. I talk myself away from my anger, and I did not know this was a 9 thing. But yeah, I sit down and I literally start thinking of ways on how to not be angry. Like, I make excuses for people. Like, well, maybe in their head, their internal logic, they assumed this and they assumed that, and so that's why they couldn't come to my birthday party, which is another thing. Everything just stems from me believing that I sound like I'm like pitying myself, and I'm not trying to like gain pity, but I don't feel valuable oftentimes. I don't feel like I am worth as much. And this could sound like a 3 thing to say, because 3s, they want to be seen as admirable and valuable and all of that. But in actuality, when a 9 is like this, it's actually because they just genuinely don't see themselves to be that way. They're like, oh, you know, my opinions don't matter, yada, yada, yada. One example, hopefully trying to avoid bashing my family with this, is that my mother, being an ISFJ, she believes that, like, I was talking to her one time, and I was telling her that, oh, yeah, she wants me to hurry up and finish college. I want to finish college too. I have 1 semester left, and you know, there's so many things in the way of me finishing college. I don't understand, but I have 1 semester left, and she would talk to people. They'd be like, oh, you know, my son or my daughter graduated college and now they're doing this and blah. And then my mother, and then they'd be like, what about Denzel? Like, how's he doing with that? And then my mom's like, oh, he's in grad school. And this was like a while back. Like, we talked about this like last year. But I was like, Mom, why'd you tell him that? Like, you know, why didn't you just tell them, like, honestly, Denzel, he's still working on it, but he's actually a life coach now, you know, and he's gotten a lot of opportunities to help people, and you know, he's doing this and he's doing that, and you know, whatever. And she was saying it in a very loving way, but it still kind of was like, oh, okay. She was like, Denzel, none of that matters if you don't have your degree. And I'm just like, dang, okay. So that message right there, maybe if I were a 3, then I would automatically, like, you know, like, I'd put my intrinsic value pretty much in that. Like, I have to achieve, I have to get this degree, I have to do this, I have to do that. But instead, I was just kind of like, oh, well, you know, like, I'm not really like, yeah, none of this really matters. You know, like, yeah, I'm a life coach, yeah, I'm doing this, but it doesn't really matter. Up until I'm talking to one of my I think it was a consultant at school, and she was asking me all of these questions about what I do and all of that. I'm like, oh, well, yeah, I do YouTube. You have a YouTube channel? I was like, yeah, on there I just talk about concepts and stuff like that, because I'm life coaching. She's like, you're a life coach? And I didn't see all of these things as a big deal. But then when she started to like exclaim it that way, and then it's kind of like this affirmation, like, huh, maybe my thoughts and opinions really do hold weight. Maybe they are, you know, maybe I am something after all. And this is integrating that 3 into me, like, oh, you know, maybe I should start standing up a little bit more. Maybe I should start asserting myself a little bit more in that way. Maybe I should start voicing my opinions a little bit more. And I got a lot of, you know, flack on Twitter because I did not show my TI enough, you know, because I was too concerned with keeping the peace oftentimes that I didn't want to share certain things. And so people even they talked to me, they referred to me as elusive with my TI in a way, because I just wanted to be so FE oriented and congenial, and I wasn't saying anything that could produce conflict. I had a dream a few weeks ago, actually the same day that I discovered that I was a 9, and I tweeted about it and everything. I had this dream that these people were provoking me, and they were like fighting me, and like, you know, really like hitting me and everything, and I didn't want to fight. This is what reminds me of Gohan once again. I did not want to fight these people, but they kept on forcing themselves on me, and finally my anger just blew up, and I beat them all up. And I was really like disdaining this, like, I don't want to do this, because my anger, I don't like riding that wave of anger. I don't like it, at least not for me personally. One of my biggest fears that I've always talked about, and Jamila even laughs about now, is that I don't want to get drunk, because I'm afraid of what would happen if I get angry. And this is apparently like a 9 thing, not wanting to get drunk, but more so just the fear of the uncharted territory of anger. I'm afraid that if I'm angry, that's where I lose all of my superpower. I'm afraid that if I do not have control of my anger, if I do not have control of my temper, then I will not be able to mediate. Instead, I will cause conflict, I will cause friction, I will sever ties, and I will do just things that are very impulsive that will destroy relationships and, you know, just cause a lot of unnecessary collateral damage. But I'm learning now that sometimes it's good to use righteous anger, almost like how Jesus did in the Bible when he was using whips and he was flipping over tables and everything. It's okay to have like a righteous anger, and I'm learning to come to terms with that. It's still difficult for me, but now, especially that I know that this is a 9 thing, then I'm going to be working on this later. And that doesn't mean hopefully that I'll become more angry, but more so that I will learn to understand the uncharted territory of anger, and I'll chart it enough to where I'll be able to explore it a little bit more and use my anger in a good way, which hopefully, you know, in the past few times, the past times that I've usually used my anger as a wave to surf and ride to harmony, by like becoming passionate and aggressive, but for the group. Like kind of like how Dr. Martin Luther King did, like, you know, getting infuriated, like, we should not be treated this way, and knowing that the rest of my group will agree. But I do not want to get angry about something that everyone else would be like, you shouldn't be angry about that. It's like, oh, okay, never mind. You know, so that's another social 9 thing. Unlike the 3, I want to teach and show everyone that we are all the same. I'm not special or better. I work towards it, but I don't like feeling like I'm better or superior to other people. I always say this quote where I'm pretty much like, the only person I'm better than is the old me. And the only person I'll continue to be striving to become better than is the current me. And that, once again, sounds kind of like a 3 thing, but in actuality, I just see that as like me being an ENFJ and me integrating 3. I want to become better, you know, not for an image, but just internally. Like I'm striving toward that personal development, and I think that it'll help me more with my peacemaking. For me, kind of like what I said in that ENFJ interaction video, it's almost like I am learning to really to lift these weights, and then in lifting these weights, it's not to show off or to have people admire like how big my muscles are, but so that I could help people lift things more, and help, you know, like be more helpful in society with these bigger muscles, and then also help other people who are willing to learn on how to get muscles as big as mine are. Figuratively speaking, I'm not, yeah. I adapt well to auras. This is another thing. 9s come out in different ways, not only with the instinctual variance, but then also with their personality type. So if you have like an INFP 9 or ISFJ 9, that's going to look different from an ENFJ 9, you know? Every MBTI type can come about in any Enneagram type. However, a lot more are uncommon. And I believe that an ENFJ9 is uncommon, especially even like I heard someone told me that extroverted nines, if anything, are uncommon. So this isn't me trying to like snowflake. I'm just stating a fact or a statistic. And that's probably why, a lot of the descriptions that we may see of nines in their behavior, it may not always fit, when it comes to like an extrovert. But when you look at the core motivations, it's still the same thing. So in one of these podcasts, a nine, I'm thinking it was an introverted nine though, he was talking about how he adapts well to auras, like he becomes what the other person needs. So when he's talking to a more intellectual person, then he starts showing that intellectual side. And then when he's talking to like a more somber person or whatever, he starts becoming more of that, because it's more of his meeting them in the middle ground type of place, which once again seems like an image oriented thing. And we have to understand once again that the 3 is still in this triad thing of the 9, the 3, and the 6. However, it's still coming from a different place. And if anything, that's probably continuing to integrate 3. But in doing this, in chameleoning in a way, that could have to do with the person's personality type. Or in addition to that, it could have to do with just the help of knowing that if you're meeting that person where they are, then you are also able to better influence them. You're also able to better empathize with them. You're also better able to create mediation. And as a 9, we just firmly believe in that idea of building bridges rather than building barriers, at least in my opinion. In one of the podcasts, a guy talked about, I stopped thinking, who am I? Nobody. And that was his integration into 3. And now he said that people often think that he's a 3. Once again, I'm going to put this podcast in the description, but I think that's the same thing with me. Like in starting this YouTube channel, and even when I met Jamila, for example, she saw me as so much of like a conformist. And even though I was like outgoing and everything, she was one who told me that like we were talking with each other, and she was like, yeah, I like this you more than that you or whatever. And that was me just really trying to like fit in with the group. Once again, it wasn't for like image, but I just never felt like I belonged, because I do sometimes feel like a snowflake. And I made a whole tweet thread about this for those of you who want to go check it out and everything. But sometimes I do feel like, even though I don't want to, it's not something that I'm embracing, that I brag about. I am different from like 97% of people, and they just kind of, don't really see that side of me, or like, I don't really fit in with the group, but I want so heavily to fit in with the group. So it wasn't until Jamila, pointed all this out with me and everything that I started to more rest into, okay, let me see who like what I really think about, in adverse to the group. And, kind of like, I started to like rest in like thinking like, what, maybe I am more than what I think. And I stopped thinking that I'm a nobody. I stopped thinking that I always have to accommodate with what everybody else is thinking. And instead, I started to try more to voice my opinion. And then this is where becoming like very knowledgeable in the MBTI helped, because shortly after, I was starting to learn how to be a more developed ENFJ and voice these opinions of mine, and really think heavily and how to communicate these thoughts. And then when I started my YouTube channel and people started like commenting and saying like, wow, this is so good and all of that, I was genuinely surprised, because I wasn't used to that. And I don't see my accomplishments as, oh, this is who I am, as a 3 would, but instead more as like a, oh, wow, you really did like that? Oh, wow, that really resonated with you? And it genuinely surprises me every time. And that's why I try to respond to everybody's comments. You explain yourself so well. Like, I totally, like, this is such a good thought. Like, I'm just always thinking in my head that nobody really cares. And a lot of people really don't care. They don't. And that's the thing that I've learned to accept in life. But now coming to terms and to realizing that, maybe I do matter to a lot of people. Maybe what I think about things is actually important to people. Then I'm trying to more throw things at the wall, and I'm trying to become more brave about that. And in doing that, I'm just, trying to create more opportunities, which was a practice for the 9 in the book that I was reading, to try and voice things that, an opinion each day, so that I could see, hey, what do you guys think about this? And I always try and make the disclaimer, I'm open to other people's perspectives. I'm not saying this is absolutely right, but this is more of just who I am. This is just what I'm thinking. And what do you guys think about it? Please let's peacefully discuss this. And yeah, I work so hard and often, not because I'm that driven, but because I know when I take one day off, I take 7 days off. I'm a lot more lazy than I appear. This is so very true. This is one of the things that a 9 said in the podcast, but in actuality, I was oh my gosh, that's so me. I look like I'm a very hard worker and everything, which I really am. And it even says this, especially for the social 9, I could become a workaholic, but this is often because it's okay, if I do more of this and if I do more of that, if I put more out into the MBTI community, more people will like me, and it's, once again, it's not an image thing. It's just more of I just want to be accepted. I just want to become integrated into the group. I'm not trying to become superior to the group. I'm trying to have my own little hey, Denzel, you're one of us kind of thing. And then being an ENFJ and all of that, and integrating 3, it's now helping me to be able to have an opinion that might be aside from the group, but if anything, also help the group to further develop and create peace. Laziness is exemplified in going deaf to my inner experience. I numb out bad experiences and lose contact with my negative emotions, hence my animal instincts and impulses, not wanting to see or be in touch with my experience. So for me, as a 9, my laziness comes once again with not seeking my inner desires and consulting, I guess, with myself. Instead, I'm just so people-oriented, which once again just seemed like a very FE dominant thing. But being a 9 and then being a social, I think that also ties in just with being an ENFJ. So when they were studying this, they probably noticed that a lot of these people were FE users or something, and I think that just explains a lot of how I am. When people on my birthday, when we wanted to watch movies and stuff, then I held up 2 movies. I was hey guys, which ones would you want to watch? And then everyone's Denzel, what do you want to watch? I'm guys, I literally don't know. I literally don't know. I want to watch whatever you guys want to watch because I'm just happy. I don't have a preference oftentimes for things. And once again, this is going back to the authenticity of FE thing, which now I'm seeing is a lot more of also a 9 thing, a 9 social thing. As long as everybody's happy with the decision that is made, then I'm happy with it. And I want my decision comes from what everybody else's decision becomes. This is also why, me being a 9, I can seem passive when it comes to internal and personal things, but then proactive when it comes to advocating for others. I see it as my FE, but it's also in addition to me being a social 9. I want to advocate for other people because I know it'll be my ticket in. I also know that sleeping on my own needs and just merging with other people's needs, then now their needs become my needs. And then the last thing that I wanted to point out was that I have a ENFJ playlist that I called ENF Journey. So it is actually an ENFJ playlist, but Jamila helped me realize that it's also mainly a 9 integrating 3 playlist. And songs such as Dollar and a Dream 3, which happens to also be the intro song to my videos, that dun 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 dun, all of that. Dollar and a Dream 3 by J. Cole and Sideline Story by J. Cole, who I also believe is an ENFJ 9, which now makes sense. I like rappers like that because I feel they're telling my story. It's wow, my whole life I felt I was really nothing. I felt my thoughts and opinions didn't matter, But now that integration to 3, it's like, hey, I'm gonna put us all on the map, like I'm gonna put us all on the map. Like I'm advocating for everyone. I'm starting to like come to be myself. I'm starting to like really like hone in on like, what? Maybe my opinions and stuff really does matter, and it's bringing more of a drive to me, and it's helping me realize that I am more valuable than I thought that I was growing up, and now integrating that. Mila also helped me realize that this is why I love rap. It gives me a permissible area to release my anger, but put it into 3 energy. With J. Cole, one of the things that he said in this Dollar and a Dream 3 thing, and I might use an expletive here, just to like for you guys to like understand it. But like in one of the verses, he's like, he's talking about like, actually, I'm not gonna quote it. You just have to go and listen to the song. Like he's really like stopping sleeping on himself. He literally has a song called Folgers Crystals where he's talking about like the coffee, Folgers coffee, and like how it's like, hey, wake up, like y'all have been sleeping on me, I've been sleeping on myself, but you know what, now I'm gonna get up, I'm gonna drive, I'm gonna push forward, I'm gonna put us all on the map. I'm no longer thinking that my opinions and stuff don't matter. I'm driven, I wanna make it. And that's a lot of 3 energy. That's a lot of integrating 3 into it. And then when I listen to a lot of like rappers, even though I'm not personally, I don't like expressing anger, I always admire when I see people like have like T.I. snapbacks, like when people lash out in like movies and shows and stuff like that, I get this like, oh yes, get him, because internally I guess that's how I feel oftentimes. And I'm literally Clark Kent when he was from Man of Steel, when he was in the bar and that guy like, just dumped stuff on him and just really disrespected him. And Clark Kent, he's just like standing there, and it's like, you don't want to do anything, but then your passive aggressiveness slips out, and like Clark Kent, he destroyed the dude's truck afterwards. But in that moment, he really didn't do anything. So that's something that I own up to. I am passive aggressive in the sense that I can start thinking things about people like, oh, well, like they don't really, matter. Like I won't go off on the people, but just like I've done in like these like videos, like I've made so many videos, and like, you just have to accept that like, hey, you don't really like, people don't really value you as much and everything, and that's kind of like just what I thought my whole entire life. But you still have to learn to try to put out there, and this isn't really a 3 disintegrating into a 9, but it's rather the reverse, a 9 who's been integrating 3. And so for those of you who are interested, y'all can actually go check out this playlist. The description, I'll put the link to there. And that playlist, it's supposed to go in order. So the first song up to the last song, the order is very intentional, and it's literally taking you through a journey. I wove in how certain like emotions will come into play, the way that I thought about things, and just overall like anything that would kind of like fully embody, what I am, what I think about, the types of things that I, like how I feel about certain things, my faith, all of that. And it's an ENFJ playlist, but it's also a Social 9 playlist. Social 9 integrating 3 playlist. And lastly, I just wanted to end this off with my sandbox analogy. I think I've read it off in a few other places, but if you haven't heard it yet, this just really ties into my discovery. And I'm hoping that I was able to explain this a lot better. But sandboxes analogy, which developed from constant messages that my opinions and thoughts didn't matter growing up, unless they were the same ones as everyone else's. A very Social 9 ENFJ kind of thing. Sandboxes. I have a paranoia of boring people, not as in fear of people who will bore me, but more of a fear of others being bored by me or uninterested in the things I say or would like to discuss. Consequently, I often prefer to go to the other people's sandbox when we are at play. conversation, or anything along those lines. I prefer to learn all about your needs, desires, topics of interest, and overall what makes you happy. Then I adapt accordingly. I do this because I know that often when it comes to it, I will genuinely be much more interested and natural at doing this than asking that of the other person. I wouldn't suffer in my mind and long to be asked about my sandbox because internally I don't think that it matters. Even if so, it wouldn't be as much as the other person may. However, until the other person demonstrates on their own very like-minded things I have in my own sandbox and shows not only a consistent and genuine interest to visit and play in mine for once, my sandbox will always remain elusive, a mirage. I won't dare waste my time or theirs. Just a few thoughts I've had and discovered about myself that I thought I would share. So this all also explains why I related to the two, because the two, they feel like they're unloved. They feel like nobody loves them. And for me, it's not that I feel like people don't love me. I just feel, I believe that I'm loved by people, but you can be loved and not really heard. And so it's more like, I don't think that people value my thoughts and opinions as much. They love me. I knew that my relatives loved me very deeply, but it's kind of like when I'd say things, it's just like, oh, he's a kid, they made me want to suppress my needs and desires. So just like how the 2 suppresses their needs and desires, then, that's how a 9 would pretty much do it, but it comes from a different place. It's not from being unloved, but it's from being unheard or thinking that they're unimportant due to the messages that they received growing up. In a similar fashion, that's also why I saw myself maybe as a 3, because integrating into 3, that's like my growth place. So I relate to that also, and kind of like growing into that, I could be actually like admired, or like I do matter, but it's not like this insane drive to achieve. I don't have that. If we're being honest, I don't have a drive to achieve and to be like admired by like people in like a vanity kind of sense. But I more so am learning to appreciate and find value in just what I am. That whole aspect of modesty that Antonia Dodge often talks about, where it's like just being accurate about what you are and what you're not. And so I'm trying to learn to rest in that whole idea, like, no, maybe I really am pretty smart. Maybe I am pretty cool. Maybe my thoughts and opinions really do help, society and help bring harmony and peace. Maybe I should make more videos. Maybe I should tweet more about what I think about things. Maybe people really do value and care and benefit from my coaching and stuff like that. This is someone who was about to give coaching for $5 an hour. So people look at me and they think that like, oh, he's so driven, he's self-promoting and all of that. Whenever I'm self-promoting, I always put for anyone interested, because I don't want anybody to feel pressured to watch my videos.
Denzel, your video is too long.
Well, you don't have to watch it. Even with my subscribers, I don't tell people to subscribe to my channel, because in actuality, I don't really like self-promoting. It looks like I do, but I really don't. I just try to be the best that I can, and then I'm learning. Dang, that's cold out there. And I'm learning to promote myself better. I'm learning to rest in actually being as valuable as I think. When I was trying to become a life coach, I said, okay, I'm going to start charging $5 an hour. And several of my friends were the ones who told me, like, why would you charge $5 an hour? That's lower than minimum wage. That was because I didn't think that my output was valuable enough. I didn't think that I was important enough. I didn't think that I knew enough. I didn't think that people would even care as much for my coaching and all of that. Like, so I was like, I didn't think that people would want to actually pay up for that, but I just still wanted to help people because that's just my desire. So then I ended up raising it to $14 an hour. And everyone's like, okay, I guess. Jamila's like, honey, I know that you want to help everyone, but you have to understand that people will only value as much as you value yourself. And I didn't value myself. It looks like I do oftentimes, and just because I had to really work on that, but I really didn't. I just had this message that I'm nothing. I'm not as important. In fact, a lot of times when you see me online talking, like trying to like say things like, oh yeah, I am important, all of that. If you ever see me doing that, is because in actuality, I'm just encouraging myself. I'm trying to encourage myself and have this positive perspective to continue to help me integrate 3. And I didn't connect all of this until recently, until I discovered that I was a social 9. So yeah, it took a long time for me to get here. It took a long time for me to even be able to charge what I charge. And even then, I still fluctuate with that. Because I still often think that I'm just not as important as people may think that I am. And it's still something that like I'm trying to I wrestle with. Like, do people really value my opinion? And it's a struggle, but it's something that I'm learning to grow into. I'm learning to integrate, and with time, I'm hoping that I'll continue to show up better. But for now, I think that that's the best that I could explain in short, without going into too much detail about my family and being too long-winded, even though this is past an hour. But these are a lot of reasons as to why I relate to 9. And just to further clarify, I am an ENFJ 9, social 9, wing 1. I don't really know what my tri-type and all of that is, to be honest. If you guys have ideas, you guys can let me know. But yeah, be sure to leave your comments. Check out past videos. My mediating is for the mediators video, my understanding before being understood video, my authenticity of FE video. Check out all of those videos and let me know what you think about stuff. You probably see it in everywhere. You'll see my passive aggressiveness in the not over idealizing people video, and just a lot of other things. Even in my Gems Out Ask and Tell videos, it's just 9 is just all over the place now. And I'm just like, wow, I'm so glad that I now know this about myself, because this is now my new growth path. So yeah, I think that's everything. Leave your comments, questions, concerns, and let's discuss. Thanks for taking the time to watch this. I appreciate it, and done.